Hey there, check 1 2, test 1 2, check 1 2. We got everything on. I don't have any help today, and it's just me. And it's kind of a last minute thing. Welcome to Banter with Brian. Because I couldn't come up with a better title. And anyway, today, as you already know from the last two conversations that I've had, this is the place where I talk with people that are smarter than me. And that list is pretty long, and we will continue the trend today. I wanted to talk with a buddy of mine who I've known just about as long as I've been in Atlanta, and he's going to drop some knowledge on us so that we're gonna be a little bit smarter than we were before, or at least know a little bit more than we knew before. I hope. So let's flip over for a second. Yeah, I'm just gonna no preamble, just right into it. Hey, Allan.
Hey, Brian.
This is Allan Wiltshire, everybody, and for people that are watching on my personal wall, there are at least maybe 200 people that know who you are, and so you're coming from your home studio. You're coming to us today. Why don't you tell everybody who you are, and then I'll tell people how I know you.
Okay. Who I am, I'm still trying to figure that out after all these.
Yeah, you and me both.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I am I'm a musician, a singer, a father of three fantastic kids, and husband to wife Sherry of 33 years, 33 years.
Yeah.
Very recent. Thank you. We celebrated our anniversary in quarantine, so that was interesting. Yeah, it was great. It was wonderful.
Nice.
I have been a worship leader, a worship pastor. Still am a professional musician, and of course, in between those things, we do different kinds of things along the way. So that's kind of been my overarching handle or role. That's kind of me a little bit.
Cool. Well, Allan was one of the very first people to ever hire me for a paying gig in this town, and it was playing a church gig. Surprise! And that was out at Greater Gwinnett Church, which at the time was across the street from a cow pasture, and now it's down the road from a huge high school, and there's all kinds of. They've developed that whole area now.
Yeah, right.
There was nothing there. I remember pulling off the exit the first time, thinking, is there a church here? It looks like there's nothing but maybe farmhouses or something. And that whole area in the last 25 years has really, really grown up a lot. And so aside from that particular church gig, there have been plenty of other places that you and I have played together, churches. But now you've got a thing that you're doing that's this Standards and Classics, which we might as well just advertise that while you're here.
Let's do it.
Tell people what Standards and Classics is.
Yeah. Well, Standards and Classics is pardon me, is it's a musical review, I guess, is the best way to describe it, Brian. And if you've ever seen the movie Holiday Inn, starring Bing Crosby and Fred Astaire, the main character is doing these shows in New York, and they're variety shows, with a ballroom and dancing and live band, all that wonderful type of thing. And he basically has this catalyst moment and says, I want to leave show business, which is what it's called back in your assistant there.
Welcome to the room above my garage.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah. So he wants to, Jim Hardy was the character's name. He wants to take a break from show business life. And then he buys this farm. He moves out to the countryside, and he's, chopping down trees and getting wood, and he and his cook and people are making meals, and so they're inviting people to come into this big old country style living room, and they're putting on these original shows that he's writing the music for, and people are dining and dancing, and so back in the day, in the mid 1940s, there were about 14 to 15 holidays that we celebrated in the United States. So the way the theme goes, this guy was writing original music for every single one of those, and different costumes and different music. And it's like, what an unbelievable undertaking. So that was the theme, since I love that period and love that music and that genre. Right. And I thought, okay, well, how can we do something like that nowadays, fortunately, we don't celebrate as many holidays. A lot of them have been, absorbed.
Right.
And so we just came up with the idea of, what would it look like if we pulled out the most famous songs of the 40s and 50s and 60s for Valentine's Day, for Christmas, and for Independence Day. And so we've done that. And, I've worked together on three of those projects, and we call them Standards and Classics of Christmas,
Yep.
Standards and Classics of Love, and Standards and Classics of Freedom. And so that's kind of what we've done, and it's fun, it's cool, and they're having a great time with it.
Yeah, it's been a challenge because the music really spans a lot of different decades. And we're in the 40s one moment, and then flash forward a few minutes later, we're into the 80s, and everywhere in between. So it's been a real challenge for me as a drummer and someone who really just likes all kinds of different music to be able to put on these different musical costumes along with you and with everybody else that works on the shows. It's been great, but that's not why we're here to talk.
No, it isn't.
We're here to talk about something completely different and something very, very timely. So what is it that's on your mind today?
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about online church. That's the topic, I guess you'd say. But while it's different from where we started, giving you a little bit of the CV of our church involvement and engagement, and then a little bit about the current project, which is a musical review. It actually is, the topic is actually related to all of it together, because it's coming out of the same heart, mind, and artist, which is me, which is we, and
Right.
and they're connected. So let me back up a little bit. Some people who are listening might hear the role of worship leader and conjure up visions of their own experience or things that they have seen and choose to either engage in or not engage in, whatever your reason might be. But I really want everybody to kind of keep an open mind and go beyond that for a second, because it really goes back a lot further and has a much broader emphasis. So more so than being a worship leader in terms of a role or a person that sings music with a guitar in the first 15 minutes of the service, or the MC, or the opener before the main event, or any of those type of things, depending on what your vernacular is. At the end of the day, I'm a person of faith.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a person that tries in weakness, to the best of my ability, to walk out this faith that I have, to give legs to this belief system that I think is very, very important. In fact, I think it's so important that as much as possible, I try to organize my life around these principles and these beliefs, So at the end of the day, I'm a God person first, and I will never advocate that the person has to believe what I believe. I would like to encourage everybody to really live what you believe in authenticity and wholeness. And you find that regardless of our approaches or what we might think is different, there's a whole lot more that draws us together rather than that which divides us.
And you could probably say that 10 more times in a row, and you would not have said it enough, considering the times that we're going through right now.
Absolutely. And so to be in this pandemic mess, my heart goes out, and it goes out to all those that are suffering and struggling, including me. Being a musician, I have a big old hole in my calendar.
Yep.
So
yep, I'm right with you.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's a very real thing. But because I am a person of faith, rather than despair and stick my head in the sand, out of some unusual place inside of me, there's a desire to help, which actually is counterintuitive.
Right.
I should be hunkering down, hoarding, and keeping it safe because I have finite resources, but that's not been the case. And that I attribute to this relationship that we have with, our supreme being, with God, and how that organizing principle fuels and makes everything kind of happen. So back to our story. I believe to a degree, everybody is involved in some kind of church.
I would agree with you there. Yeah.
Yeah. I believe that, and regardless of what denomination is, or even discipline or whatnot, because it's really not about that as much. It really has to do with how an individual connects with their creator.
Right.
Okay. And so if you have some type of engagement with with God, and I'm just going to use the term God because it's the most universal and people understand it, and it happens to be where I'm coming from. Okay, so if you have some engagement with God, then from that place there's a way and a system to sharpen, cultivate, and deepen that connection with God.
Right.
And if that is a practical, real part of a person's belief system and then identity, there is a degree to where the relationship I have with other people is impacted because of that vertical relationship.
Right.
Okay. And so as I work on that vertical relationship in whatever way I choose to do that, or whatever way I think is appropriate, in my case, that's in line with the Bible and the scripture, that's where I am. Therefore, there's a direct impact on those around me. And so I start to find that as I'm interacting with people, I end up finding that there's an affinity. I start to find out, hey, we're a lot closer than I ever thought we were. And
Right.
we're a lot closer than I thought we were. And we're a lot closer. It's like, oh my gosh, we're a lot closer than I thought we were, but for some reason, we're not using labels and monikers. And,
Right.
we're not doing any of that, but yet we have this connection. And I believe, and I actually know that it's all because of what we're doing vertically. And so as I look at it that way, I realize, okay, we're connected a lot more. Because we're connected a lot more, I got to sharpen this connection because I can't live without this connection. And that connection filters into a lot of different strata and areas of life.
It sounds very inclusionary, and I'll give people a real world example from my own life. One of the reasons why I got out of church towards the end of my teens and stayed out of church for a long time was this very exclusionary qualification that you had to, and it was sort of a moving target where if, as a musician, if you were going to participate in worship, then you sort of had to hit all the marks and then you could participate. You could be up on that stage with those people. Otherwise, you needed to go sit in the back with the sinners until you decided to kind of change things. One thing that was very different about your approach, and I saw it immediately the first time I worked with you, was that you don't. There are a lot of churches that if someone's not a Bible thumping, pew jumping Christian, they don't really want you to serve. They don't want you to be there. But your approach was completely different. Your approach was you related to people first as people. And if there was any way that you could give them a place to use their talents for something a little higher than just show up and play a gig, then you were going to make that opportunity available and hope that the influence of all the things going on around you would maybe start to maybe sort of rub off on the person that showed up. Talk about that for a second, because I think as we get into the discussion we're really going to get into, that's important.
Yeah. I appreciate that. That was very eloquent and very nice of you to say it. Let me tell you the truth of it. I'm actually a schmuck, and I hired people to play because I wanted the band to be great, and I schmoozed with everybody because I wanted you to come back next week.
Hey man, whatever.
Yeah, it's just funny. Well, my mom and dad are retired Salvation Army officers, which means they're pastors in the Salvation Army Church organization and philosophy. And I know that's counterintuitive to a lot of people. We can talk about that later on. But bottom line, I grew up in a church in my formative years. It was called the Salvation Army. It still is. My mom and dad are ordained pastors in that outfit. Mm-hmm. And a lot of what we did in the inner city of Washington, D.C. was to deal with people who were living in the inner city. And so we saw challenges to people's lives that we kind of grew up with that, we were always exposed to folk that were just in process, trying to figure out who they were. And some of them were facing some very difficult things. So the point I want to make with that is I got to watch mom and dad care about people that were nothing like us. Right. I got to watch mom and dad care about people who were having really horrible periods in their lives, and that formed and shaped my relationships with people because of my relationship with God. Mm-hmm. And I remember I was talking to a buddy of mine. and he was asking me to kind of tell some stories about, growing up and whatnot. And I'll tell a real quick one just to illustrate the point I'm making on, of course, how incredible mom and dad are. But when you got an authentic relationship with the creator, it literally does filter things. It really filters into things. When we were growing up, we lived in the Salvation Army church building in the inner city of Washington. And this was during the race riots in the 60s.
Yeah.
One particular evening, stuff is just literally all hell broke loose, and it was rough down there, and people were looting and blah blah blah. My dad gets up. Now I'm knee high to a grasshopper, so I'm hearing about the story later on. My dad gets up, he puts on his Salvation Army uniform with his hat, probably looked more like a bellman than anything else seen today, and he gets up and he goes down, from the second floor where the apartment was down, and he goes out into the street while everybody's acting crazy, and he goes down to provide some comfort and some peace and trying to help people out. Now, stuff was getting crazy. By God's grace, he didn't get killed or arrested or anything else. Just nuts. You don't do that today. You stay away. But here's the point of it. Years later, I was able to ask my father about that situation. I was like, Dad, what possessed you? What possessed you to...
Why?
Yeah, exactly. What were you thinking? And this is what he said to me. He said, I knew that our people were struggling, and I put on the uniform as a representative of God and the Salvation Army to go down and serve those people. He knew beyond a shadow of a doubt when he put on that suit, that uniform, and walked down there, he was basically God's agent to try to impact what was going on. So the point of that is, that's what I grew up in. And so as I've walked through my church and ministry career, even my professional career in different other industries and other things I've done, that overarching impact has never been eroded. I can vividly remember those stories and several others. And so I appreciate the comment you made. It's like, there's really no other way, man, because it's like people are people, everybody's got challenges. And according to the Bible and theology, it's God that does the drawing. It's God that does the connecting, the switch that goes on the inside. And then you start to have this relationship with God. He's the only one that he's got the key to the box. He's the only one that's got the key to the box. There's nothing I can do. Zero I can do. So if he turns it on, hey, great. If he chooses not to turn it on, there's nothing I can do about that. So it's not my deal. So where I'm going with that is long hair, short hair, no hair, tats, no tats, strange, not strange. It's strange, not strange. If we happen to be in the same circle, if for whatever reason our paths have crossed, I firmly believe that there's a divine sovereign reason for that. And it's not my business to qualify. It's my job to walk the road. And that's it. The beginning and the end of my job is to walk the road. And if I'm honored enough to be around when the switch gets turned on, cool. And if not, great. I pass it on to someone else. So that's kind of where that is.
Yeah. Well, again, it's treating people as people first, not as spiritual beings or having a particular philosophy or believing it. Like, let's start with the fact that we're all living, breathing human beings, that we all bleed red, and we're all on the same little marble together. Let's start there and figure out how we're the same. And then this other thing that might make me a little different from you, you'll find out about it. It won't be any big secret. And hopefully, as you find, this is what I kind of got out of it, was hopefully as you find out more about me, you will see something that answers a lot of your questions without me having to tell you exactly. But then when you ask, I'm going to tell you. That was definitely what I got from it. And it was a kind of a refreshing approach considering where I came from. So all that being said, let's flash forward.
Yeah.
Let's flash forward into 2020. And there are some things that haven't changed. There's still, and I'll probably get you in trouble because I'll say it, but you're sitting next to me while I say it. There's still a lot of exclusion in the church. But there's a wonderful opportunity if what you're trying to do through the church, what you're really trying to do is to gather people and serve people and help meet needs that won't get met any other way other than stepping into the gap. If that really is what your mission is, if your goal is, then this is prime opportunity right now to be able to have an opportunity to interface. And the interface that we're talking about right now is online church.
Yeah.
There have been plenty of studies that have been done that have said that people will visit a church as much as a dozen times online, virtually. Sort of like when you're looking at a house or you're looking for a house with virtual real estate. Used to with real estate, you would find an agent. You'd tell the agent what you wanted. The agent would go with you to at least a dozen different places, and then you'd whittle that down. The agent's list was 30 or 40 deep. They got it down to a dozen. Then you get it down to 2 or 3. Like there's this whole process where everybody has to show up and actually be in the same space. But now, because of technology, people can get as much as they could possibly ever get about a church online if the church does it well. Between the presentation of their services, either in a live or a taped format with video and audio, and the content of their website, usually you can find out a lot about a church. Sometimes if the website's not very good and doesn't have a lot of content, you can find out a lot about a church that way.
Or business or anything else. Yeah, you're right.
Right.
Yeah.
So, like I said, there have been studies that have been done that said people will visit a church at least a dozen times before they will physically be there. So they're looking at these spiritual real estate locations. Maybe they're going to be moving to a particular area. Maybe they want to switch churches. So that's when we're talking about outreach, when we're talking about interfacing with people, that's one of the great opportunities that's here now. But also, I would hope that maybe that a lot of this online worship is an opportunity going forward that people will begin to see the importance of the experience in the space. One of the discussions that I've had several times over the last 10 years with churches that I've helped in consulting on how to do this, how to do online media, is the idea that if you make the online worship experience so good, if you use 5 or 6 or 7 cameras and everything's in HD and everything's really crisp and sharp and sounds fabulous, well, why would people come to the church? Well, they'll just sit in front of their television. But to me, if you're giving them the best experience you can through that little screen, what you're really saying is, you think this is good? You should actually be here. It's even better. It's even more enveloping when you get here. And I don't know that a lot of churches or churches on the whole necessarily have that view.
Yeah.
What have you seen in most of the churches that you work with, and how they treat their online content, specifically worship? But
yeah,
I
would agree. I think you're dead on with that. And being a consultant, I think you have a better handle on people's view on it. I look at it similarly, but just slightly different. While the online engagement is very, very important, and yes, you can say if you are loving this rich content in all of its dimensions, when you arrive, it's going to be even better. Yeah, that can be a real hook. But I've also discovered that if you're bringing people in who have a spectator approach or spectator philosophy, then that's really where that's where they're going to click. If they're coming in to watch, then okay, watching live could be more engaging than watching electronically. And so there's a place for that. That's very important. But personally, I think that's just sticking your toe in the water. That's just the beginning. That's just the start. And kind of the way I view all this now in the philosophy after all these years of doing it, I kind of liken it to, I call it my view from the cheap seats, because I'm not the head guy. I've never been the head guy. I've been close to a lot of head guys, and I've served in this capacity for a lot of years in a lot of different settings, but very much like a fly on the wall. people say, oh, it's the music guy. So, you get to hear conversations, you get to be involved in meetings, you get to see a lot of things, but people aren't really noticing who's paying attention. And so I'm able to take this experience here and recall 3 or 4 that happened earlier, and then see them across different strata and different levels. And I've served in churches not only here in the U.S., but it's been involved in mission opportunities internationally and whatnot. So I've got a kind of a larger view. So I look at it and say, okay, my view from the cheap seats. So what happened about 6 weeks ago? What happened 6 weeks ago is that every church in America became an online church.
Yeah.
Every single one. Now,
whether or not you wanted to.
Yeah, exactly. No choice. And of course, it's because of sheltering in place.
Mm-hmm.
But, regardless of the motivation, we're there. And to your point, there's some people who are doing it really, really well, investing in technology and even thought leadership. They're kind of thinking through the process and kind of getting their arms around how do we do this. And then there's some people that are just kind of, it's a temporary thing. We'll do what we need to right now until such time as we are let outside to go play again, and that's the group I really wanted to address and kind of give some thoughts to, because I think an opportunity can be missed. And I think the opportunity in front of us is now, because of technology and because of sheltering in place, a church's size, a church's resources, church's geography, and in some respects, as a church's demographics are no longer they're no longer deal breakers.
Right.
They are no longer inhibitors to your quote unquote success, or let's define success. Success in terms of you appropriately communicating your message and seeing a return on that communication. Okay. If I put it in church language, presenting the gospel and seeing people come to faith. Okay. Hopefully that's not offensive to anybody, but that's just the language that we use. So regardless of what you look like now, because everything is online, it doesn't matter. You are now not only an online church, but you now have the potential to be a national, have a national impact. And in some cases, you can have an international impact.
Definitely.
We've never been there before.
Right.
Ever, And so I think that's where the opportunity is. It's just all of a sudden the game has changed and everybody is in the big leagues.
Yes.
Everybody has a shot to do something that they never, ever thought possible before. And I just don't want people to kind of miss that.
When I was growing up, one of the things that I grew up in a Pentecostal church, evangelical church, a church that, for better or for worse, was definitely more, their sights were more aimed at what happens later versus what happens now.
Okay.
And one of the things that they always seem to point to in the later part was there would be some point in time where everybody across the entire globe would hear the gospel of Christ. And then that was almost like a signpost or a marker. And at some point, not too long after that, after everyone on the globe had the opportunity to hear the gospel, then we would see Christ come back. Mm-hmm. I don't really want to focus on the Christ come back part. I want to focus on the first part, which is 1988, when I heard everybody across the entire globe would have the opportunity to hear the gospel. That was kind of mind-blowing. We had just gotten 13 channels on our cable, and we still just had AM, FM radio, and there was all of these, there were points of contact, but they were not points of contact that would traverse every distance, that would traverse every landmass, every ocean. The thing that I've come to realize as someone who is an online creator and a producer of content is that for the church, because of technology, we're there now. Mm. Even in third world country, in Kenya, someone may not have a computer and an internet connection where they can sit down. They may not have an iPad where they can hook up to Wi-Fi, but they have a smartphone. and they can watch videos on that smartphone. They can interact with other people on that smartphone, and they can listen to podcasts on that smartphone in the middle of Kenya. So we really are at that point now where if the church has ever been able to have the opportunity to put their message in front of everybody on the planet, it's now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you talk about being national, international, global, every church at this point, if they have any vision whatsoever, would see this as an opportunity not only to get another 50 people in the pews, but to be able to take what they're trying to do in spreading their message, spreading the gospel, and pushing that out to people they might not ever be able to physically be in the same room with.
Great point. Yeah, great point. One of the things I have learned over the years in this whole relationship with God thing is the importance of having the importance of healthy and accurate theology. And what I mean by that, I don't know why, but somewhere along the line, Christianity ended up being a hyper intellectualized discipline. And so when you talk to people about things of faith, it's almost like you need a graduate level education because the language just jumps up. I'm still not sure why that is. Maybe because when a topic has risen to being very, very credible, it becomes a scholarly approach is taken. I don't know. I'm just making it up. I don't know, but it's kind of crazy to me. So to where something that's so integral to the human experience and every human's experience, a relationship with your Creator, we can't understand it.
Right.
But anyway, so fortunately, just been some great people in my life that kind of helped it, not dumb it down per se, but really break it open for me and help me understand what's going on. So the passage, you're referring to several passages when you say people hearing all over the world and then the return of Christ. And that's a very true, very real teaching in Christianity. There's one particular verse I want to pull out though, because it kind of gives framework to all of that. It's in the book.
All right.
I think it's Matthew 24. Well, I won't quote, but it doesn't matter where it is. That's kind of eggheadish. I won't be eggheadish. But the particular line says, "This gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world as a standard, and then the end will come." Now, on one hand, you could say, yeah, everybody on the planet, all 7, 8, 9 billion will hear at one time, and therefore some type of event will take place. A deeper dive into that line, that teaching, gives a completely different meaning. The gospel, which means good news, of the kingdom, meaning not here on earth, but what God's talking about, his domain. So the really, really good news of God's domain has got to be taught, demonstrated, lived, understood, and absorbed as a standard, as this is how it is.
Right.
This is the way it goes. When that takes place, then the end will come. See, that's very different than mass communication. And on one hand, there's a real truth to that. But again, it goes back to accurate theology. If you do a deep dive into what God really said, it's less about the numbers. And the numbers are important because that's not litmus test. It's an index, an indicator of kind of where we are in this grand chronology.
Sure.
That's very, very important. But more so than the numbers is the engagement, living with this type of lifestyle.
Right.
That makes sense? And
at
that point, then we see the end. Now, as far as online church is concerned, I think that's absolutely lining up because, yes, while a lot more people can be reached, a lot more people can hear, a lot more content can be pushed out to folk, the end goal is when this heart is not involved in church all the time, with this heart that's in church all the time because of a lateral relationship with God, all of a sudden those two hearts start to get closer together.
Right.
When that takes place, okay, that's a beautiful thing. The online experience, what I'm really passionate and excited about is that the online church experience can foster the two hearts coming together.
Right.
But you can scale that. And now the two hearts don't have to be Georgia and Tennessee or Fulton and Gwinnett. It can be USA and Australia.
Yeah.
It could be, it's about there's no longer a limit. See, and it's not
Right.
about we're both the same age, therefore we relate. We're in the same group together. No, it's just, hey man, I heard something you threw out on in the middle of that track, on that thing, and that's cool. Let's kind of let's talk about that. So after a few conversations back and forth via text, all of a sudden, hey, there's a connection. Now
Yeah.
the stage is set, and now it's not limited to locale. That's what I'm excited about.
Sure.
That's what I think we can facilitate.
Yeah, there's enough technology now, and the technology is usable enough for most people that communication really transcends. It transcends location, it transcends time zones, it transcends so many different things because almost everyone, for me in particular, let's say there's a particular musician I want to get a lesson with. It doesn't take more than about 15 minutes nowadays to get anyone on the planet on the horn. Now, it might be that I send them a DM in Instagram. It might be a personal message over on Facebook and Messenger. It might be over on Twitter. It may be email. Maybe the person has a website and I put something into their contact form. There's all these points of contact now where you've got access to someone within a reasonable amount of time. There are very few gatekeepers at this point. So now communication is almost immediate.
Mm.
And when you think about how distance has all of a sudden disappeared, then what used to be the other side of the globe now really is a matter of the other side of the screen.
Wow, yeah, great way to say it. Yeah, yeah, other side of the world or other side of the screen. There's a book in there. Yeah, that's a great title. Yeah, yeah, exactly. And because of that, it can foster the human engagement. It can foster the connection. Another illustration, of course, you're talking about lessons and engaging with a mentor. I can think about shared experiences. So you made mention of some challenging experiences in your early years as it related
Yeah.
to church. Okay. Well,
Mhm.
without getting into too much detail about that, if you were to communicate a story or two in whatever platform, let's say you're at my church and we're doing a thing, and we take a break and say, hey y'all, great song. We're gonna talk to Brian real quick. He's just gonna talk about some stuff happening in his life. So you give a minute or, and then that goes out, that content goes out, but that experience that you shared goes out. And then somebody from across the globe picks up on that. But what he picks up on is not how cool you look, and you do look cool, and not, and not how great you played, and you play great. What he picks up on is, hey man, I had the exact same experience.
Exactly.
The thing you're sharing happened to me, but it was in a totally different type of church environment. And you know what? I've been sitting on that pain. I got that burn in my saddle, and I see red all the time because of it. And you're talking about it in a way that I've not been able to talk about it before. It's like, wow, okay, that's what I want to facilitate. And see, the technology lets that kind of thing go all over the planet because every person's experience, now let me qualify, because of my lateral,
Mm-hmm.
I can work on my horizontal. And that dynamic now gives an individual the ability to communicate something which strengthens everybody's relationship across the board. There is a guy in some location around the world that if he heard 6 minutes of your story would go, oh, that was me, you know? And it's not you only. I mean, it's everybody. Everybody's
Right.
got this little thing that took place, which is the open door to this engagement, being able to communicate with people and connect at a deep level. The two hearts coming together. That's where I believe this entire thing starts. And that's the flame that I want to fan to keep that going.
Right. So let's look at two sides of the coin real quick when we're talking about uh, the online worship experience, online church, and really it can extend into whatever kind of media that that a church will put out. Let's look at the good and the bad. What are people doing really well? Where are they falling short? Let's
Yeah.
start let's start with the bad side because I want to work towards the positive.
Yeah. Well,
What are some things that you see in your purview?
yeah. Well, I think one of the Bad. I would say areas of growth or challenge points. And I think the very first one.
So you're a lot more diplomatic than me. I'm
No,
just like, you're screwing this up.
no,
I mean, honestly, you're just screwing this up.
I'm thinking about who's going to be watching this. I think that would.
I'll be the bad cop. It's fine.
Okay.
It's fine.
I think area number one would be vision. According to what the Bible teaches, that people perish because of a lack of vision,
right?
Because there is no forward view of how it can be, and so that with no forward view, it impacts what you do. So what I mean in practical terms, believing that the use of the internet for online church is a stopgap measure. It's a temporary thing. In a few weeks, we're opening up America, opening Georgia.
Right back to where we were before.
Exactly. I think that's a challenge. Now, that doesn't mean shut the physical doors and stay online. I'm saying now you got two doors open.
Yeah.
And so now it's incumbent on us to think about, okay, now what does this mean? I was doing some research a while ago and read a few articles. And there are lots of online, articles, magazines, and whatnot. One particular guy was writing on, I think he called it the online pastor.
Mm-hmm.
It was the actual term. And he was listing out responsibilities and whatnot. And even in another article I read, it was an actual job description for a quote unquote online pastor, engagement with people during services and all this kind of stuff. I was like, wow, this is interesting, kind of cool. It's very, very timely. And I looked at the date, and the date was actually one of them was 2016, the other was 2018. So to the point, there are some people with vision who are out there a little bit saying, hey, and I think that's coming on the tail end of the campus philosophy, where you have a church, but it's one church, but it's multiple locations, and they call that campuses. My term for it is campi. What's the plural of campus? Campi. Nice. Anyway, but and so there are a lot of places that are doing that. Even here in Atlanta, we have quite a few locations with multiple sites.
I think the people that don't go to church call that Six Flags over Jesus is what they call it.
That's great. Six Flags over Jesus.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the idea is that you get them there and you keep them there as long as you can possibly keep them there with all the things they could possibly do, and you take all the barriers away from them to have to go anywhere else. That's why they put the coffee there. That's why they have a cafeteria there. That's why after the church service, then all of a sudden they've got some kind of fun activity and they're going to do something else that's going to get you through the afternoon, and then you'll still be there for the evening, and then they'll have something else for you. A small group, they'll have something else.
And then,
that's the idea.
Yeah. Okay. So all right. Well,
if you got enough roller coasters, people will stay all day long.
Yeah. Well, what I'm specifically referring to is that they have one main location and then other geographic locations.
Right.
Some can have as many as 6, 7, 8, and then they have satellites all over the country. So that kind of thing can happen. So I think number one, without having a kind of vision, that's a challenge. I think the second challenge is the warehousing mentality. Where, and of course, I came out of a very large church, multiple thousands, and this church never did the campi or campuses, but instead they helped to plant and birth other churches. So I think over the years it's been upwards of 30 different independent churches that they've helped to kind of birth. So in really large churches, sometimes there is this idea of just moving masses of people from point A to point B, and there's really not the engagement on a personal level. Now, this particular place I'm talking about has conquered that because they've got a very, very strong, they call it discipleship ministry or model, where people are broken down into smaller subsets, and then you kind of work with them that way. So there's a relational connection and training connection. But there's some churches where they don't take that approach, and it's really about just moving the masses. Now, that doesn't mean you got to have 1,000 to do that. You can do that with 30 or 40, but it's all about mindset. If your mindset is we're just going to move the masses. So this event's done, move them down to this next thing. Okay, that's done, move that. And so there's not engagement on a personal level. And I think that's a challenge. Church becomes event after event after event, regardless of your size. And the purpose of the events is not to go deeper with individuals and people to find this way to get the hearts to connect. That's a real challenge. Some of the other, the use of technology the inappropriate use of technology. And by that, I
What
mean,
do you mean by that?
well, this is personal opinion again, my view from the cheap seats. So take it with a grain of salt. It's one thing to have a lot of money and buy a lot of stuff and have it look really, really great. And I think it's very important. I think excellence is a high value, but it's all about your motivation for doing that.
Right.
So it's, for example, I know a couple of places that are well heeled. I mean, they got budgets and stuff is great, big old facilities, and from a technological point of view, they do some really, really fine work. But the people who either volunteer or work on staff in that particular area, they're all afraid for their jobs all the time.
Yeah, I had the fortunate opportunity to work with some folks earlier earlier last year, and that was definitely the vibe that I got, and it's the reason why my time there was very limited. Why I didn't choose to kind of move forward with things, because there was definitely this idea. It's almost like a type A sort of mentality that has run amok. So from the head, everything is type A. Everything is make or break. Everything is you got to bat 1,000. Everything is, but that gets me to a point. One of the things that I see in churches across the board. My grandmother used to say, "How you do anything is how you do everything." And so for some churches that are in that position where they've got plenty of resource and they've got the ability to carry the production level as high and as far as they'd like, in some cases, that becomes an entirely other thing that I shouldn't choose my words, but I'm only choosing my words because you're sitting there. It becomes a thing where there's a competition, and that competition is not a competition of can we get this message to people or not? Can we get something that resonates with them or not? Can we deliver this in a way that is as polished as anything anyone would expect to see in any other kind of medium, but that has that ability to cut right to the quick? Instead, the competition is with the church across town, or the church down the street, or if our media is not as over the top and as fabulous as Church B, then they're going to go to Church B. They're not going to come to Church A. So we've got to make sure that instead of approaching it from the standpoint of here's the message, now how do we find the best way to most accurately and adequately get that across in a way that resonates? The flip side of that is the church that doesn't see any of this. It's usually a church with an older constituency, and they're looking for instant ROI. Mm-hmm. Oddly enough, both sides are looking for the same thing. They're looking for instant ROI. They're thinking, I don't see the point in us investing all of this money if it's not going to get people from down the street into our place. So what they end up doing is the very least that they can do to at least say, we have an online service, we have a website, or maybe they go as far as, well, we have a podcast. But it really, everything seems to be an afterthought. So when you get their live worship webcast, it's what I call the security cam webcast. It's basically a static camera in the back of the room, and generally it's either just a microphone on a camera or a phone. There's several churches that I've surveyed the last 6 weeks that basically their online presentation is, all right, I'm going to take my phone and put it in the back of the room, and that'll be our worship webcast. or they'll maybe they pipe in the mix from the board.
Mhm.
And so the only thing you're really hearing is direct microphones. You're not hearing any of the ambience. You're not hearing any of the people. You're not really getting that energy that happens when people are in a space.
Yeah. So what you're
you've got
describing,
you've got two ends of the spectrum that really have the same goal in mind, which is ROI. If we invest this much money and this much time and this much effort, how quickly can we expect to see this much in terms of our attendance go up, our website traffic go up, eventually our revenue go up? We got to make everything go up. All these numbers, all these quantifiable things have got to go up. Not realizing that it starts with what you're trying to convey and how you're trying to convey it, what the spirit of that thing is, and then it's how can I use the tools available to me and the resources I have. I don't have $500,000 to build a television station in my church, but I have some amount of resource that would allow me to do something. Looking at it from that standpoint of what tools are available at the level of resource I have, and then how can we leverage those the best way possible?
Yeah.
And for most churches, the security cam webcast, if they're honest with themselves, is not the best they can do. When a church decides that they're going to send $250,000 worth of water filters to Kenya or something, but they won't invest in the technology that's required for an adequate webcast. For me, I look at that and I go, your priorities are a little out of line, because that's sexy. That's sexy to be able to put that big number to this big project. I told you I was going to get you in trouble.
No, not at all. That's the interesting vantage point. But what you've done very eloquently, you basically outlined challenge number 1 and challenge number 3. So the very first thing that you're describing is vision. So using the metaphor of, or the description of the webcam in the back as opposed to $250,000 going, okay, that's an indication of vision to me. A church that would spend that much money to send things into missions and then not put up just use a cell phone in the back of the room, that shows me where their vision is. And so their vision is gravitated towards world missions or doing things in a third world context. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just an indicator of where they are. Then the second thing you made reference to, of course, people living in fear when they've got $500,000 worth of technology to play with, and then other places that have the money but won't make the investment in technology. That just comes back to the inappropriate use of technology. That's what that is. So you're exactly right. And yeah, I mean, you proved the point. Without a vision, people aren't going to do anything, but even their vision guides what they're doing. So for that church that has the camera in the back of the house, that falls in line with what their vision is. It's not that they don't have money, not that they don't want to spend the money, not that they don't want excellence. It's just that their vision guides and dictates. I'm saying the opportunity in front of us today is to have a much bigger, broader, comprehensive vision. And so the question, if you think of Simon Sinek, you start with why. Mm-hmm. It's like, why are we here? Why do we have a message to promote? Okay. And then why are we going about it the way we are? If we are guided by those kinds of things, then the what starts to be modified. It starts to be modified. And again, I believe that is all those things are just an indication of where a person or an organization is with their vertical. It's just, and that's what I meant by saying, as the vertical gets straighter, gets more connected, you start to see how many of the horizontals are already in line with that. And there's so many similarities. Now it's no longer I'm competing with church across the street. I'm recognizing that because of this vertical, mm-hmm. I'm recognizing the field in this horizontal, we're on the same team. We're accomplishing the exact same thing. You just happen to be a mile over there. I'm a mile over here. Now the relationship changes. Hey, want to have coffee? How's it going for you guys? Where are you strong? We're weak over here. Would you help us in the areas where we're weak? Is there anything we can do to help you? It just changes the whole deal.
Definitely.
But that happens when you get the vertical right,
Right.
and then the vertical takes care of the horizontal. Does that make sense?
Right. Oh, totally,
Yeah.
totally. It takes the adversarial part, the competition part out of, because the moment that churches started hiring executive pastors that all they did was handle the books and the business, the marketing, the office infrastructure, all of a sudden churches really did become big business at that point. I see. I grew up. I grew up in a time, you did too, where, dude, I told you I was going to get you in trouble. I grew up in a time when we didn't have that. That didn't exist when I was coming through church as a teen, early 20s and stuff. That didn't really exist. I mean, the pastor was the guy that sort of handled everything, and there's still churches like that. But especially once it gets past a certain point, both in number and revenue, then you start to see that it begins to be run more like a business. And that's when some of this stuff starts to run askew, and that's when the competition seems to come in. I'm not saying for everybody.
Okay.
I'm just saying that from a lot of as a consultant, when I drop into places and have to spend time in certain places, I have seen that.
Yeah. Okay. I can see that, and I disagree with you to a point. I don't think that it's a cause and effect. I don't think the size of the place or the staffing delineations determine bad behavior or loss of focus. The loss of focus was there before they got big and before they hired the person.
Right.
That's where that is. That's my read on it, my view from the cheap seats. So
Sure.
it's an interesting observation. But let's turn the corner on who's doing it well, and what can we replicate, which addresses your comment. Okay.
Right.
I remember going to a church some years ago, and there was, after the mega church movement came about and churches are starting to grow. A definition of a mega church, for those who don't know, is any church in excess of 2,000 people. So if you get to that point, you're technically a mega church. Once you get beyond 2,000, all the names change, but you're just big, got a lot of people.
Right.
So this particular church was doing a lot, and so since they were one of the first ones, they were starting to have master classes. And talk about best practices. These are the things that we've noticed, and these are the things where we're getting results and whatnot. And so all these churches from all over the country were coming, trying to learn it their way. Okay, Here's my point. One of the things that they were doing really, really well, which I believe we can continue to do and copy, is every affinity group that they had had two purposes: the task they were together for, and then the real reason, which was the deepening of their relationship. So, for example, there was one particular team that was the parking lot team, the parking team. And so you've seen it before. Folk get there early. They got on. They look like crossing guards from high school with and they're come over here, move it. So these guys, X number of guys and girls. Let's pick a number. Let's say 5. Okay, 5 of them would get there on a Sunday morning, an hour before things start up, and they'd get together. And this is a model of doing it right. They'd get together, and then they would have a coffee and they would pray. They'd go around the circle, and how's everybody doing since last time we met? How's your mom and them? What's going on here? Are you working? Are you not working? Just they would do life. They would talk about life, and they would spend time deepening the relationship, praying for each other, and knowing that they were connected and they were supportive. So that's the second part of why they met together. That's why. And so they would make sure that was always deep, that was always true, that was always authentic. Now, the first part was the what. The what was, we need to move the cars.
Yeah. Let's get people where they need to go. Let's get the cars in. Let's get the cars out. Make sure nobody parks on the grass.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So to put it into church terminology, that was a ministry team. That was a parking ministry team. But the ministry of that team was to the other team members.
Right.
Okay, so you had the A and the B side of what you get, the number one, number two. Number one, we need to move the cars and keep it organized. But while we're meeting to do that, our whole reason for being together, the main thing here is us deepening these relationships and taking care of each other. So that's the model. But see, that went on with the people that were teachers. That went on with people that were the musicians. That same dynamic was copied across every single affinity, task-driven, purpose-driven group in the entire outfit. They had their tasks, but then they had the real reason for getting together, their community, and deepening it. So that's a thing to copy. That's a thing to replicate, And one quick thing. There's even one other group which I found so amazing. Oh, they had a particular ministry where they had some guys that were mechanics, or they were mechanically inclined. Not all were professional mechanics, but they would work on cars for folk that couldn't afford stuff. And they did the same thing. Of course, they spin their wrenches and whatnot, but before they start working on cars, they connect. And there was another group, also a bunch of wealthy businessmen in the church. Their job was giving. That was their quote unquote ministry, the way they served the church. They wrote checks. That's what they did. But before they wrote the checks, they had the coffee. They touched base with each other. They prayed, and then they did their task. So that's it. That is a thing to replicate and a thing to copy.
And to that point, seeing the other side of the coin, where the improvement can be in some of the larger organizations that I've dropped into to do the consulting work that I do, that's definitely one of the points that I try and bring forward is, okay, so in terms of the polish and the production and the presentation, especially more affluent churches, it's sort of incumbent upon you to let's look at the secular world. Let's look at television and see how they do things. Let's look at movies and see how they do things. Let's look at other kinds of media, see how they do things and how we can bring those things in. But realize this isn't a TV station. That this isn't a movie set. This first and foremost is a point of connection for people. This is a place, this is a community. And so as we're building this team of people and we're trying to train people, find volunteers that have a proclivity for certain kinds of tasks, maybe one has a visual eye, one has more of a great ear, another one really has the ability to organize a lot of data and make sure that the team runs well. Like all of that is very important for the production side of stuff. But then there's this other side that you're not going to get at a television station. You're not going to get it necessarily on a movie set, which is, all right, so instead of everybody getting here, 5 minutes before we start actually doing the job of what we're doing, then maybe we take some time either before the actual session, date, service, whatever it is, or maybe we take some time outside of. In some of the churches that I've done AV coordinator duties for, there are times when I've gone to lunch with the people that are on my team, or times when I've been able to actually go to events outside of what was happening with the church, where I would grab somebody and say, hey, let's go to this thing, and find opportunities to be able to relate one-on-one or collectively, 3 to 5 people in a group, 3 to 5 people from the team. So that's somewhere where if there's a shortcoming, you can actually use it as the opportunity. Here's an opportunity. If I just change the way I look at this and what you're saying, let's start with the why. The how is pretty cut and dried. What are we doing and how are we going to do it? But the why. Ultimately, you've got 2 whys. You've got the why of the outward reaching, the outward facing goal, which is to interface with those who are going to receive this content. But then there's an inner goal of, well, all of us that are here, we're here more than just to do this job, regardless of whether it's a volunteer person or a paid person. So definitely being able to look at it through that lens of, okay, this is a different environment in that respect.
True. Slightly, it reminds me of a passage of scripture, and I think there's a lot of pushback from people, either professional church people or just people who've been doing it a long time, that this online thing is a passing thing because we're supposed to meet together. We got to be the body, and they even refer to a passage in the book of Hebrews, the assembling of yourselves together. I was actually talking with somebody a while ago, and he kept hitting me with that very thing, the assembling of yourselves together. And while that's true, and what he was saying is accurate, if it really goes in line with what we're discussing, and again, having accurate theology makes all the difference, and theology, the word basically means study of God. That's it. Everybody's got a theology because everybody studies God to some degree. Even to not study is to study. So everybody has a personal theology. So the whole point is to make sure that theology is well oiled and understood. So the point I'm making, in Hebrews, I think it's 10:25, It says, neglect not the assembling of yourselves together. I happen to have my Bible here, believe it or not. Sorry. Don't forget, forsake the assembling of yourselves together, which is the manner of some, but exhorting one another, and so much more as you see the day approaching. So that basically says, yeah, always meet together, no matter what happens. Make sure you can meet together, meet together, meet together. And yeah, that's true. But a deep dive basically reveals a couple of things. Number one, what appears before that little verse, a little teaching, has really more to do with the right relationships that people have, about drawing close to God and connecting with Him, about holding true to your faith. One line even talks about considering one another to provoke them towards a stronger relationship with God. So the setting behind that whole little line, and forgive me for a part of what I'm describing, is what we refer to as hermeneutic. It's the discipline of interpreting. When you interpret things scripturally,
I like hermeneutic. He's a nice guy.
yeah, Herman Munster. Yeah, when you interpret, it's not just this little point right here. It's this point as it sits under these points and as it sits in front of these points. So that whole section has to do with a whole lot more than just being in space. It has to do with kind of pushing people and encouraging people and high-fiving people on to do really, really great things because of your relationship with God. So as you look at the line, don't neglect getting together, which is the habit of some, but instead encourage each other. So the point of that whole line is not being hunkered down in one location. It's put all your energy and effort into standing right next to your guy, shoulder to shoulder, and helping him do what he does really, really well, and him helping you do what you do really, really well. That's really the focus of it. And that's what, regardless of what your ministry or your task or your role is within the church, that should be the outcome. That some guy, some girl is standing shoulder to shoulder with me as a peer, and they are helping me get better, helping me do this thing a whole lot better because it sharpens my vertical, which impacts my horizontal. And so whether it's a wrench spinning ministry, or whether it's, I'm in the band at church, or whether I'm on the tech team, doesn't matter what it is, whatever that tasks I'm doing is, that dynamic should be present. That is a best practice that I think we've lost, and it needs to come back. Whatever my task is, there's got to be somebody side by side who's helping me get better, not only the thing I'm doing, but helping me be better because of this vertical and this horizontal. That is the best practice I think we can absolutely recapture in the online church experience. Sorry to go off, but
No. I think it needs to be said. It definitely needs to be said.
Yeah.
And if anything, it's an admonition for people to maybe take a look at what they're doing in their process and the environment, and say, how, maybe we're doing this a little bit. Maybe how can we 10x this? Or are we just missing it all together and we just never decided to talk about it? It just kind of, a church I did some consulting for and dropped in for a couple of months doing some things with them and their teams. There was a lot of that. There was a lot of, well, this is just kind of how we do it. And to actually have that discussion and to have the words come out, sometimes it just needs to be said. And now that it's said, it's sitting there in front of us and we can do something with it. So let's talk for a second about what are some things that people can do with what they're trying to do in their online worship experience and the content that they're putting together, whether it's the actual live stream or the taped version, the podcasts they're putting out, the blogs that they're writing. What's an actionable, or a couple of actionable things that people can look at that are going to pull them into a direction not of increasing ROI, but increasing impact, which is actually more important?
That's interesting. Well, okay, since we're getting into trouble here, I'm not representing anybody other than me here, so no one's going to say this. I think online church is the wave of the future, in conjunction with some other things. I don't think this opportunity needs to be lost. I don't think it's can't wait till we can go outside and play again. I think it's very important to look at this, approach it seriously, to have vision for what can happen that is definitely in line with what what I believe God is saying, what God says and what God wants to happen. Okay, so let me start there. However, I don't think it's for everybody. And so in terms of having actionable steps for people, I think the first thing is to realize that not everybody's going to do it. Not everybody wants to do it, and not everybody is called to do it. And that's okay. That's okay. I would rather you get out of the game than stay in the game and do it bad. And again, this is just me. I'm not representing anybody else, so nobody can get in trouble. There are people who will do it because it's the thing to do. Just like years ago, it was the goatee. It was a fashionable. Everybody had these dumb goatee, some people look awful.
Electric guitars in church.
Yeah, exactly. I came up in the keyboard era, and now keyboard's gone. It's all about guitar. So it's a style thing. So, and in a few years, it'll be another style thing. So I don't believe that online needs to be another style thing. That's not it. Right. You need to do it because you're called and you're committed. You believe this is the direction that your supreme being is drawing you into. And in terms of the ROI or the benefit or the impact, God's going to determine that. God is going to determine the outcome of this thing. The responsibility for the Christ follower, the person that's a true student. The word disciple just means student. The true learner of this path towards God leaves the results to God. Mm-hmm. It's about me doing what I'm supposed to do in humility and openness. And I can test the strength and validity of the approach because I get closer vertically, I get closer horizontally. I keep coming back to that, not to make the sign of the cross, but there's some benchmarks that we got to keep coming back to, which are timeless, that will not change. Because all this other stuff is just, this is hot right now. It may not be hot in 20 years. It'll be something very different. But there's some standard
stuff. It'll be virtual reality in 20 years.
Oh, gosh,
you put on your goggles and you're right there in the pew.
It very, very well could be. So I would say that not everybody's gonna get onto this. Those that are, I believe that there's a role within the church, and I mean the group of people who share hearts as opposed to an organization. There's a role that's referred to as the pastor or the shepherd. And I'm not talking about the head guy or head girl. I'm talking about the person who feels a calling and an obligation to take care of other people, to take care of their spiritual needs. Okay, I have a pastor in my life, and the guy I'm talking about actually owns a restaurant. It's the guy that discipled me. He watches over my soul. Everybody, I believe with all my heart, needs the opportunity to have a pastor, to have somebody that engages with you at that kind of level. Okay, so I'm talking to that person. I think within this whole online church church thing, there are some people who are pastors. It is their ambition, their goal, their ethos to care for other people. Those are the ones I'm talking to. Those are the ones that need the action items. Because they're already being pulled to this. They're seeing opportunity, but not exactly sure what to do. When we have another conversation, we can get into some more specifics there. But that's the narrow band. So it's not everybody. I think everybody's interested. I think we can all talk about it, but I think the ones that will do are the ones. Like, for example, during this pandemic time and this shutdown, you and I have talked before. This is an opportunity to become better. This is an opportunity to do some personal development and whatnot. Yeah. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. Out of every 20 people, I wonder what percentage of those 20 have actually engaged in a consistent way for personal development.
From what I've seen, it's single digits. So,
and it's the same way. Within this concept, while everybody thinks they should do online, and it can be a great thing, I'm talking to a really narrow band of people who get it.
While we're talking about online, you're talking about pastoring and things like that. We can move beyond just the technology of the online worship service into all of the different modes of communication. I know that there are a lot of small groups that are using tools like Zoom to be able to interface with each other. And one of the things that I admonish people to do, if you look at the tool as a thing to take the friction out of the contact, then that changes your commitment to the technology. So if you're not seeing the technology for what it is, then least common denominator is where you end up. So when it comes time to have a Zoom call with someone that's in either an individual or a small group of people, and you're just kind of holding your phone up while you're sitting in the corner of your living room, while that is great from a casual nature, it doesn't leverage the technology in the way that it can. Now, I'm not saying you've got to put up like in this house where I've got basically a television studio in my house with all the lights and fancy cameras, but I am saying if you put a little bit of thought into, all right, I'm going to sit in a place that feels warm, that feels inviting. Maybe the things that are behind me reflect who I am. Maybe I'm a reader, so I have my bookcase behind me. Maybe my family is what's important, and so I make sure that I have pictures of my family behind me because that's part of who I am and who I'm trying to convey to the other person on the other end of the camera. Also, making sure that you got good lighting. If your phone is 6 feet away, it may not pick up a great picture if it doesn't have adequate light. If you're 6 feet away with your phone, or if you're holding it and kind of like this, maybe the sound isn't great. So there are little tweaks that you can do with the technology. You can get a stand for your phone. You can sit in a place that either has great light, or you can bring a lamp towards you to illuminate enough of your face so that you feel warm and inviting.
Yeah.
So as much. It's like, as we're having this conversation, you're the spiritual guy and I'm the technical dude, and
Nice.
and you got all the high-minded kind of stuff, and I'm like, all right, so let's really get down to the bottom. Like you're the clouds and I'm the dirt on this thing, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, so if you're going to use the technology, like with Zoom, treat it as, this is my ability to get rid of distance.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, you and I it was important to me in having this experience with you to make sure that what you see on your end is nice and crystal clear, and that you hear really, really well. Now, no, I'm not saying people have to go buy a fancy microphone. I'm not saying they have to go buy a lot of lights. They just have to put a little bit of thought into it. And they have to understand that the technology exists to take away the friction. Yeah. And you're not leveraging it in the way that has the most impact if it's an afterthought. Yeah. If it's just a way to, well, I can't get over there, so I just guess I'll Skype them. Yeah. It's the technology exists to take the friction away. And when it comes to the online worship, we'll bring it on back to online worship. There's the technical part of, well, what tools are we going to use? What modalities are we going to use? But the one thing we haven't talked about is that technology, and talking about taking the friction out. The technology exists for you to take the friction of distance out so that you can immediately convey to the person who's watching what the identity of your church is, what the presentation and the community and everything that is the fully encompassing experience. You have the opportunity to do that with audio and with video, and even beyond that, other kinds of media with podcasts and blogs and all the other things that you can do. If you think of that technology as being able to take away the friction from whatever it is that keeps you from connecting and landing with the other person, it changes your commitment to the technology. So if you realize that, okay, well, what I'm telling people by my security webcam cast is, I just wanted you to be able to see it. I don't really put much more thought into it than that. Then what you're probably saying is, we just want you to get here so you can write your check. That's about as much as that's the unspoken part of this. I don't really care about that other stuff. We have to do it because everybody else is doing it. Well, do you have a nursery because everybody else has a nursery? Do you have bathrooms in your place because everybody else has a bathroom? Do you have all of that? you think about having the best workers in your nursery and the cleanest nursery and the most inviting environment for kids to be in. Churches think about really super clean, most of them think about super clean bathrooms and having them in convenient places when they're building their buildings. Like, they put all this thought into this stuff. But then when it comes to media, they treat it like an afterthought. They treat it as if, well, it's free. We get it to them.
Well, it's I see where you're going, and of course, that media is technology is your passion. So I can feel that
Right.
coming across. But see, the same way you're conveying all this to me, and I'm feeling you, so to speak, and connecting with not only your thoughts and your ideology, but also your passion. The exact same thing can happen in a small group or even a preaching setting. The as you say, it removes the tension it's no longer a barrier to connection. I use the metaphor of the hearts connecting. Because we are thousands of miles away does not mean we can't have a transcendent moment. That's not true anymore. That's what I mean by the playing field has now been leveled. So when I say pastor, for the person whose heart is focused and geared towards bringing people together,
Right.
they see the opportunity and they see the need. And now all of a sudden, all of these things are important. The setting, what your lighting looks like. Am I coming across harsh or am I coming across warm? The use of the camera, all those kinds of things, they are now of interest. One of the articles I was reading some time ago, and this guy on the West Coast who is an online pastor, and this was a couple of years ago, his entire approach was, do these things because they're important, because you want to connect. But then he went on to talk in the article about making sure that as an online pastor, I'm interfacing with all the other different aspects of this particular church. So it's music, it's preaching, it's small groups, it's kids. It's like I'm adding that online spice, if you will, to everything else. I'm looking at what you're doing and say, hey, as I look at what you're doing from an online perspective, or hey, this was great today, Mr. Offering guy, and we talked about this a while ago, financial guy, you're doing really great with getting the money in, because that's an important part of organization. But from an online point of view, have you considered, because someone has that vision and they have the ability to see how this technology, when it's leveraged, can really make everything better. But again, it's not everybody. Not everybody's going to get it, and I can't beat you over the head if you got a hat on. If your heart is tenderized and this is an important issue, now you're going to hear, and then you're going to start to make the types of changes.
The only thing I have I take issue at all, not to be negative Nancy on that, is
oh, go ahead.
I'll be the bad cop. I told you I'm gonna be the bad cop. 98% of the people that have a smartphone. 98% of the people that spend a lot of time doing this.
Yeah.
The excuse that that's not the way I do it, that's not what I'm comfortable with, I don't buy that, because if you're looking at Facebook, if you're using Twitter, if you're watching videos on YouTube, if you're emailing people back and forth, and you've got that smartphone, if you're doing all the other things that you do with your smartphone, with my smartphone, today I was working on my timing. I also have another app on my phone that lets me know how loud something is. If I'm in a room with loud noise, how loud is that noise? There are apps that you can do all kinds of things with. I can take great pictures. If you use your smartphone and you take pictures and you run it through a filter and you put it on your Insta, like, those excuses are gone, because you're in the technology. You may just say, well, I just put my pictures up on Instagram. You're in the technology. You're using the technology. Now it's a matter of looking at how you can continue to get deeper and leverage the thing more and commit to it more. And compared to what it used to cost, is nothing now, comparatively speaking.
Yes.
Yeah. So 10 years ago, we were still live webcasting from this studio, but it cost hundreds and hundreds and orders of magnitude of hundreds of dollars to live web stream from this house. And now it costs this. The only real investment is in the technology to put a more polished presentation there. And even that, when you amortize that across time, is really not a lot of money. So that's one of those where I get what you're saying, but I have to call people to task, because the technology, you've got technology in your pocket that all the technology in your entire house 20 years ago was not as powerful as this one thing.
Well, here's the reason I think so. And we're talking specifically about church and online churches, so a group of people. Okay.
Right.
I know people that still write checks in this day and age.
Wow. Well, I know a couple.
Right. Okay. So
they're over 50.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Make sure my
Bad cop.
And then I know some people that, there's no paper in their financial system at all. Everything is just electronic. Both systems still exist, and every business, not every, but a lot of businesses are out there know that they have to have their paper-driven model as well as their electronic model, because people kind of fall into habits. Now, move it over to the church world. Okay, there are some people, and I don't mean this disparagingly. It's just a statement of fact. Sure. There are some people who still who they have a model of church that has not moved in a couple of decades.
Right.
And so because of that, it's never going to be anything other than what it was when they were in their formative years, their teens, or when they were tweeners, or they were children. So whatever was going on in that particular generation, that has become cemented in stone forevermore. That is their model of church, and that's the way it's done. That's not wrong. It's just understanding that's where people are. And so for that group of people, you have to be wise, and you have to be focused in the way you address it. For example, one of the thought processes behind standards and classics has to do with this 55 plus demographic. And that music that we play is very important to them because it embodies the memories of different periods of their life. No, we're not going to slap rock and roll in the middle of a concert, because that doesn't resonate with who they are.
Sure.
It's out of respect and love and care for them. We want to present to them a very polished, excellent presentation of some really important memories in their life, and it honors them by being able to do that. Okay, so move that entire approach over. Within the church, it's the exact same thing. That's why I say not everybody's going to get on board with this, and that's fine. There's room for all different approaches.
Sure.
But when you find the ones that will go deep, those are the ones I think there's a really, really great opportunity, because from that point of view, it's limitless. So, I mean, it's not an either or. It's not a better than. Sure. It's just a statement of where people are, and understanding that and trying to work with it as much as possible.
So, you know me, I'm all about actionable steps, and here's an actionable step that I'm going to toss out into the world, because I don't see it happening.
Okay.
And the church or the corporation or the small business, whoever gets this and can harness this, is going to win the game. I have yet to walk into any church that I've either worked for or consulted for where they have a group of people that are their technology team, and their sole purpose. You don't need a technology team to teach a teenager how to use YouTube, if that's where you're streaming to YouTube, because teens aren't going to Facebook. For people that are 20, 30, 40 into their 50s, you don't need a technology team to teach them how to interface with Facebook. But again, when we're talking about people that don't necessarily leverage the technology, we're generally talking about older people. You'd be really surprised. There have been a couple of times in the past where I've actually gone in and done things like going to a retirement home where a large constituency of a church lives there, but can't, for one reason or another, get on the bus and go to the church. Well, what was the solution? The solution was Brian going to the retirement home and asking them, so where's your TV that's in your common area? And they direct me to the TV that's in the common area, and I very nicely say, I notice that you don't have a Fire Stick or an Apple TV or some kind of thing that allows us to put content other than cable on your television. And I've done this in several retirement homes. So what the church has done is they've interfaced with the retirement home and said, look, we'll put this piece of technology in, costs $100 or $30. It doesn't cost very much. It takes more effort than money. We'll put this piece of technology in. You can leverage it for all kinds of other things. We would just like it if you would put, for our constituency, make sure they're in, they're in the room where the TV is at 11 o'clock on a Sunday so that they can see our church service. They can participate in our church service. And then all of a sudden, people that are there at the retirement home that their churches didn't think about the same thing, they go to that same church service. Now, all of a sudden, that satellite, that other campus that you used to have to build a building for, you've leveraged the technology and made the church happen in the common area of a retirement home. Because the why was more important than the how. The how was there. You just had to think long enough to find it. The why is there's a large group of these people that love this church, that love coming here, but they can't. So that's one example. But putting together a technology team of people that are very passionate about all the different kinds of technologies, especially media, and saying, all right, so our purpose here is to look at groups of people that aren't leveraging this technology and seeing, is it that they can't afford it, or they don't know it exists, or if it was in front of them and they may have it. My parents have an Apple TV at their house, and they've had it for 5 years and don't know how to use it. That's just because Brian hasn't taken the time to really show them how to use it. Do we need to send someone and be the direct interface? And immediately that also gets us back to where we started with the team that parks the cars. That technology team becomes the exact same thing that your car parking ministry becomes. It becomes outreach for people that can't get to the church, but it also becomes another point of contact for the people that are on the team so that they can all interface with each other and have another opportunity to be with like-minded people that have the same why.
Yeah. I think that's a great approach. That could be the birth of a whole new approach for folk. Use the terms outreach and whatnot. That's wonderful. The point is, as I hear it, the point is to have some type of vision that you move towards. And again, I don't think everyone's going to do it. So if I had to give 4 action steps, I would say number one, a vision for technology. Either develop a vision for technology, ask God for a vision of technology, copy from other people, however you get it. Just, spend some time dialoguing with this tech team and say, what could it look like? What would we like it to look like? So start with a vision. Then number 2, I'd say target people that would be interested in attending your church service. Think through, how much like me are these folk, and what kinds of things, not maybe affinities, whatnot, but just kind of think through who's around us every week that we see, and are there people just like this in other locations?
What are the use cases? Because not all there's more than 1 or 2 use cases for online worship. It's not just that, I'm sick and I can't get to church this week. It's not just I live in Denver and I'm going to move to Atlanta and I'd like to find a church. There's all kinds of other reasons why people use this and they interface in this way. So
exactly.
Outline all the use cases.
I'm thinking more on the other side of people regularly engaging with this because this is the way they've chosen to engage with church. That's what I'm thinking in terms of the opportunity. And the third way, once people are starting to connect, this team will really now start to focus on building relationships with this online audience. You make it their business to answer the posts.
We didn't even get to that. I'm going to put a pin in that because we'll come back to that. I want to talk a little more about
that. Answer the posts, to engage while things are either, if you're streaming, real time, or after the fact, getting information, sending surveys out, remembering birthdays, and, building relationships of the same way you would do if you had an uncle or an aunt that was 2 states away. You do all those kinds of things with these folk, and I can tell you. And then the last thing is serve. What would it look like to serve this group of people? Let's say it's let's say it's 5. We just pick up 5 people. Okay, well, now I've got 5 people who don't drive to downtown Alpharetta, because they can't, they're a couple hours away, but now it's my responsibility to connect. And just a personal example, been working with a couple of churches in the area. There's one very modest church somewhere in West Georgia, and they have a Facebook group, and they've been putting out online content. It's the pre-production model, so they get it together and then basically make a little movie and push it out. But because of that, in the past 6 weeks, they've seen an increase of people joining the group from out of the state of Georgia.
Oh, cool.
They've even had an opportunity where there have been some checks that have been sent from out. Yep, I'm telling you, from out of the state of. So this is very exciting to me to say, wow, when somebody was really engaged in this, they've got a vision. The vertical's cool, the horizontal's impacted. It's like you start to see what in the Christian community we refer to as fruit. We see the results. You call it ROI. The return on what you're doing from a spiritual point of view is the fruit that's taking place, which is not my thing to make happen. It just kind of happens, and it's healthy and everything's better. So now the task is, got these folk, they're connecting to this group now. Now let's spend some time engaging with these people. Who are you? What's wrong with you? Who's your mom and them? And let's get to know you. So what can we do now on a weekly basis to make you part of this community? And what does that now look like? And so it's from that I arrive at these 4 action items. We're now in a position of serving and figuring out what can we do to improve the quality of the lives of the people, not just who are in the pew. And one day we will go back to opening up and we'll have pew again, but then people who, for whatever reason, cannot come to the location and their entire model of engagement is online. They're also part of this community that we have. What do we do with them?
I want to go back to a point, and it really keeps tying back into this theme that we've been just hammering, and I'm glad we're hammering, about connection. So the obvious philosophy of the security cam churches, the ones that just put the thing up in the back of the room, but I also see this in even some of the higher production outfits, is that they're trying to broadcast to the masses of people that could possibly be out there. What I would encourage them to do is the same thing I'm doing right now with what we're doing. On the other side of that camera watching us, I'm not worried at all about, are there 100 people watching? Are there 1,000 people watching? Are there going to be 1,000 people that are going to look at this and share this? And I'm talking to one person. You and I are having a conversation with one person on the other side of the screen. Mm-hmm. There are a few churches that I've seen start to head in that direction, whether it's at the beginning of their webcast, they pull one of their ministers to the side who directly addresses the camera and says, "It's great to have you here with us. We'd really like to have you here in body, not just in spirit, but we're glad that you came to us this way. Thanks for hanging out with us. Let's go have some church." Whether it's that or it's a pre-taped piece that they pre-roll or post-roll at the end, say from the pastor, that's directly looking at the camera and directly addresses the person on the other end. When it comes time to put together all of your content, especially your worship service, instead of thinking, all right, well, we're doing what we do to a large group of people, our 50 people, our 500 people, our 5,000 people, however many are in your church at the time, the way we broadcast it from the stage to all those people, take a different tact with all of your media, especially your online worship. There's one person that you're talking to. Now, maybe that one person brings their family in and you get 4 people. But ultimately, it's one person on the other side of the camera. So as you communicate, you've got to make sure that what you're doing, all of your modality, all of your message, the way that things look, the way that things sound, the way that people address that online audience is one person.
Yeah. Great point.
You may say, in the middle of your service, we really appreciate everyone who's here when we get back to regular services. We really appreciate everyone who's here today with us to have church. And for those of you that are online, that's cool. But at some point, throughout the presentation, you have to let people know that they are seen. And that's where the impact comes in. When someone just thinks that you're just broadcasting to them and to whoever else might be there, it's very impersonal.
Mm.
It's almost as if those people aren't real. Well, the people that I can see are real. They're right here. Those people over there, well, I know they're there, but they're not really real. Treat your presentation, whether it's your online worship, your podcast, your blogs. If you write a blog, it's one thing to write a blog to expound on a scripture and just kind of have a general thing. But here's this general idea I'd like for everybody to know. But if you write that blog post in a way that says, I see you, and here's an idea I'd like to share with you, something for you to think about. And then you end that with, if this got you to thinking, or with church services, if you don't know Christ, I'd really like to talk with you. Somebody here would really like to spend some time with you and maybe share a little bit more about what Christ can do for you. All of that language says that I see a person on the other side of the camera. And that's where impact really starts to happen, because the one common thing, no matter what your location is, no matter what your life experience is, no matter what your vocation is or your position in the socioeconomic structure, we all, at some point in time in every single day, feel lonely. We feel unseen. So to get past just the technical part of it, because I'm the technical guy, you're the clouds. I'll stick my head in the clouds for a second and say, if you take that tact with all of your media, especially your worship service, there's one person on the other side of that screen. I want to give as much as I can to that one person. It's going to have such a richer, more sincere impact, because you really are thinking about a person. You're trying to speak to a person. You're trying to communicate in this way that right now it's one way, but by the end of this, I'm going to give you a way to come towards me now. Whether it's sending an email or filling out the contact form, or whatever modality you use for that person to be able to leave a comment. All those things, it's been interesting as we're talking about community. So Russ Rogers puts a "Hey guys" comment in the chat in the comments as you and I are talking. This is an opportunity for us to connect with people that we know. Yeah. A friend of mine from high school, Paul Lampton, sitting right there, and left a very nice comment. Thank you, Paul. I appreciate that. To acknowledge the person, to engage that comment section is there to engage the person. And one of the things that I've done a couple of times as we've been talking, if you see me looking down, I'm actually kind of replying to those people and still trying to have our conversation. For the ones that I want to give a longer answer to, as soon as we're done with this, I'm going to jump in the comments. I'm going to leave a comment for people. Yeah. Thank them for showing up. Thank them for being a part of the discussion. And hopefully people will share this. Yeah. And that's where you start to see the real impact of this, is that when you make that connection with one person, then all of a sudden they want to share it with someone else that feels the same way they do.
Absolutely. I totally agree.
And that's where you start to really see the impact. Yeah. It just spreads out exponentially at that point.
It does. And that works in the dynamic with social media and whatnot. And you said that very, very well. That's part of why I believe, and I'm not getting the clouds, but part of why I believe not everybody's going to engage with this when we talk about the online church experience, because not everybody is wired up to say, I connect and care about another individual that they have never seen before. I mean, just from my system of belief where I come from, the person that does that is I believe a person where the switch has been turned on spiritually, and you now have a capacity to love somebody that you don't even know exists, but you feel this as palpable, like they're in the very room with you. Right. That's not everybody I've ever met in church, and I'll go on the record in saying that. It's not everybody I've ever met in church, and that's okay. That's fine. For those who have ears to hear this, those are the ones I'm talking to. Those,
Yeah,
and of course, sometimes the term pastor or shepherd or whatnot is awkward for people because there's so many things that are, you know, coagulated and stuck to that. But it's
right.
basically somebody that can walk through life with you and feel the crap that you're feeling. They don't take it on, but because they're feeling what you're feeling, yours is a little bit lighter. They're a
Sure.
partner, they're a friend. You know, there's an old Greek term called a paracletus, which basically means that's the word that we use for the Holy Spirit. That's his gig, to walk with you lockstep, and so you don't
Hmm.
feel, as you say, alone anymore. Okay, well
Right.
there are people who are in church, whether they're on staff or they're regular parishioners, who have that gifting, they have that type of spiritual thumbprint. That's their gig. They do that naturally anyway. That they
Right.
do that. Those are the folk I'm talking to. And I'm saying
Yeah.
this medium can give you the ability to hang with folk that are
Yeah.
across the country and across the city like you never known before. And it can be very, very cool. But you talk about the technical aspects of it, which are all very, very, very true.
Mhm.
I'm saying yes to all that. Move it over into the space and realize we have an opportunity.
Yeah.
We have an opportunity to do something that has never been done before. You have the chance to love somebody that could be hurting, that feels alone, and they will only respond to you because you made a connection on a podcast or a text, and you can walk with them on this next mile and a half of
Right.
road and make their journey a little bit better. That is the opportunity that's in front
Yeah.
of us.
So we've talked for almost 2 hours, and
Oh
the
God,
wonderful
really?
thing, yeah. The wonderful thing about this is we're talking about church specifically, but because you're a musician, because you've got musical endeavors that you're doing that are outside of just church music, um, I definitely want to take the opportunity to say that you could insert almost anything into this conversation in the place of church. If you're a musical artist and you're a singer songwriter, all of this applies. If you've got a small business, the same things apply. If you've got a group that you meet with that's a support group for whatever, all these same things apply. You just take the word church out of it and put anything else into this, and all of this applies. Because done well, all of this is about connection. All of this is about trying to lock arms with other people and move forward together in life, and become the support, become the cheerleader, become the brother or the sister. And so if you've done me the favor of sitting through all of this and listening to Allan and I talk, I appreciate you. I really do, and I definitely see you, whether or not you've left a comment. And I appreciate you taking the time, Allan, to talk to me. This has been a great conversation. I've loved this. It's the kind of thing that you and I will go for 2 or 3 hours when we're in the room together and talk like this, and time just kind of goes. It just goes. I hope we've done some good for some people. And if anyone wants to get in contact with you and maybe enlist you for the very specific, very refined skill set that you have, how would they get in touch with you?
Wow, that's the most diplomatic way I've ever heard anybody describe me. That's amazing. That's great. Well, you can reach me at allanwiltshire.com, my website. You know, if you want to find me on Facebook, it's ATL Artist. So I'd be happy to engage with you. My social media is listed on the bottom of my website. I'll just tell you that that website is not a Christian website. It's just about my music and stuff like that, and about standards and classics. But you know, as I said in the beginning, I'm about being a God person, and the music flows out of that. So I don't think the two are mutually exclusive at all. They're symbiotic. But I'd love to connect at any level and continue this conversation or any other. And so my thanks to you, Brian, for the platform and the engagement.
Yeah.
This has been huge. I really, really appreciate it.
Man, it's been a good time. I appreciate your time, and I appreciate everybody spending time with this. Please make sure you share it with anyone that would find this valuable. If you're on a team at a church, if you're an influencer at a church, if you're on staff at a church, by all means, there's a lot of great stuff that you can pick through in this, and I think you'll get a lot out of it. So, Allan, I will see you and talk to you again really, really soon. And for everybody else, I will see you and talk to you again when I get behind this mic. Later.